Welcome back to the things we all carry, and Happy New Year. It's the first intro or first show to be released after the new year. It's a reissue. This week I am going to reissue Diane Cotter, and Diane is a name that should, if it's not familiar to you as a first responder, as a firefighter, it should be, her name should be familiar to you. She put up one hell of a fight for us after her husband was diagnosed with cancer, and it was determined that his cancer was a direct result of the gear he was wearing. And that created this war basically that she waged on the use of gear that's infested with PFAS. And in the show, we talk about what that is and what it does to a body and why it's so devastating. Diane was a warrior, is a warrior, excuse me, and it took a heavy toll on her. But she kept going because she knew what was right, and she knew that it needed to be exposed. And she came up against some very, very heavy and powerful competition, all the way up through political ranks to include our own union president and representation at the time, who was, I'll be honest, more interested in lining a pocket than doing what's right for the firefighters. And she went toe to toe with these people, and to be honest, she came out on top. And for us, that's a huge victory, and she deserves our thanks and gratitude forever. She was a hero of mine, and she should be a hero of everybody in the fire service. So that being said, I will lead into her episode, which was originally episode 61. But now I'm, like I said, I'll re-release it today as part of my holiday break. I'm still retooling my brain, retooling some thoughts on the show, and I'm busy recording. I worked a tour, and now I've got a few days off. And I'm just taking some time for myself, taking some time to clear my head, and kind of start a new year. So it's been one hell of a year, and I'm looking forward I'm looking forward to 2024 and see what it brings me, see what it brings us, see where the show goes, and to see where life goes. It's going to be another interesting ride, but I'm here for it. I hope everyone's New Year's went well. I hope everyone's holidays went well. And I hope that there's a sense of expectation for what the new year is going to bring you and what you can become in the new year and what I can become in the new year, and how we can improve things, improve ourselves, and improve relationships and improve positions in life, improve what we do in the firehouse, outside of the firehouse, all of it. And I know it sounds corny. I don't do resolutions, but it's a good time to take a look at yourself and find out what needs to be worked on, what needs to be increased, what needs to be decreased, where you can go, and how you can continue to change and grow. And I think I've talked about that quite a bit. Growth is important. You stop growing, you stop living, really. And so it's time for me to do that, and it's to investigate and figure out where I want to go with personal life, with professional life, with the show, all of it. It's a daunting task sometimes, but like I said, I'm here for it, and it should be interesting. So stay tuned for Diane's show, and then in a few weeks or a couple of weeks, we'll be back with live show or with new shows, and we've got some good ones in the bank, and I think they're going to be very interesting. And I just hope that you guys keep tuning in and keep reaching out, keep telling us what you think about the show. Give us that support, and like it, share it, talk about it, and just get the word out there. The Things We All Carry is a podcast about first responders and their stories surrounding trauma on the job. The intention of this podcast is to raise awareness and share meaningful conversation around the subject often viewed as taboo or simply ignored. Be aware this content may be graphic, and it is real. It may not be suitable for children or adults triggered by this subject matter. Welcome to episode 61 of The Things We All Carry. Few words can strike fear like the word cancer. The adage is that it will touch everyone's life at some point. That's never been truer for me. As I sit here writing today, I have my own mother foremost in my mind. She's put up a valiant and brave fight over the last few years after being diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. Her spirits never seemed to break over that time, and that holds true today while she's home in hospice care. My mind also turns to a friend, really a brother, as he and his family turn their energy and focus to this battle as well. Unfortunately, as firefighters, we are much more susceptible to this insidious disease than the rest of the population. For many years, we've all heard this dismissal of it's part of the job or something to that effect. We face numerous carcinogens on a daily basis, from diesel exhaust to poor sleep to the byproducts of house fires. The last thing we need is another risk added to that list. Yet in a cruel twist of fate, we have just that, and it comes from the very gear meant to protect us. Our turnout gear is festering with and continually shedding what are commonly called forever chemicals, or classified as PFAS. They are known carcinogens with identified quote-unquote safe levels. Our gear greatly exceeds any so-called acceptable levels. Every time we don our gear, we put ourselves at greater risk for the fight of our lives. Diane Cotter is a patron saint. She met our industry head-on with dogged determination after her husband, a 28-year vet of the Worcester Fire Department, was diagnosed with cancer. Her journey was one of discovery both as a person and an activist. An unassuming wife and mom who at one point refused to have more than 99 Facebook friends became the face and voice of a fierce battle for what amounted to the soul of the fire service. She took up the mantle and the burden of advocacy at the time when the old guard had selfish reasons to quiet and discredit her. Much to our benefit, she never quit and didn't back down despite their efforts. Take a listen as Diane tells her story from the personal side of the battle. Listen as she speaks of the toll it took on her and how she came out the other side. Then find a way to thank and applaud her for everything she's accomplished for all of us in the fire service. It turns out that we as firefighters really do need heroes, and Diane Cotter is just that, our superhero. A quick reminder to please help us build a community which not only recognizes, but supports each other through the struggles and recovery. Reach out through Instagram at @thethingsweallcarry or email mystory@thethingsweallcarry.com to offer support and share your story. Please remember to leave a review on iTunes and give a shout out to any first responder you know, love, or care about. Y'all enjoy the show. I'd like to welcome to the show Diane Cotter. It's been a long time getting this interview set up. And we had it set up a couple back and forth, a couple of instances with my ADHD, which prevented me. They didn't prevent me, but it's a good excuse for screwing up. Thank you for being patient, and thank you for giving me your time this morning. How are you?
Oh, I'm great, Brendan. Thank you so much for having me today.
So we'll get into your story and why you're on the show and why I find the story fascinating and very vital for the entire first responder community here. But let's hear a little bit about you first. What was family life like? Where did you grow up? And where did you where did you get your values and your morals and everything from?
Sure. I love the question. It's a difficult topic for me, but I did grow up in Worcester, Massachusetts. I grew up in a section of the city of three deckers. My mom was Irish, my father Italian. My mom stayed home to raise my brother and I, and we lived next to Norton Company, which was a great big factory in the city of Worcester. And the childhood was traumatic. Unfortunately, I wish I could say it was beautiful, but it was traumatic. Um, my mom was, unfortunately, suffered greatly with alcoholism and led her to a couple of suicide attempts, um, in shock therapy. And by the time I was 10 years old. So my dad was an icon in the city. He was very well known because he managed what was then called Lowe's Poli Palace. And those are just gorgeous theaters that were designed by, I think it was Walter Lamb out of New Haven, Connecticut. So he had pretty much, he was a gregarious, character and loved beautiful women. And my mother dealt with that the only way she could. So childhood shaped me to be a very, very private person. And yeah, and things changed, after, even, even when I met Paul, he was very gregarious, and I, I think people thought I was gregarious, but it was probably, uh, an act because of my father's being an icon in the city. We were expected to behave a certain way. So, um, yeah. So I met Paul in high school. It's a beautiful story. He was driving down what we call, I guess, 190. He tells me it wasn't a different street, but I know it was 190. And I'm in the passenger seat with my girlfriend who's driving, a panel station wagon, her parents' panel station wagon. This was 1976, I think. And I look over and there's just this gorgeous man with beautiful long hair and this gorgeous smile. And he's driving his father's baby blue Cadillac with a white roof. And I'm going to tell you, I know it sounds so corny, but in that second, I saw stars. I fell in love. And this all happened in a heartbeat. I said, that is the man I am going to marry. So it was the 70s, remember? So he pulled up, he smiled and motioned like, come on over here and follow me. So I said to my girlfriend, hey, do you know these guys? And she said, yeah, yeah, those are the Cotters. And so we followed them into a parking lot and he's sitting in the front seat driving that baby blue Cadillac. And he motions for me to come over and sit in the car with him. And he turns around and says to the guy sitting in the car with him, everybody out. And so, yeah, that was the beginning of the loss. Yeah, started yeah,
So what year was that?
that was 76.
Okay.
And we just celebrated our 40th anniversary.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
And what about children? Do you guys have children?
We do. Yeah, we have a daughter, Julie. She and her husband live in Massachusetts. They're both social workers, and they have blessed us with two beautiful boys that we adore. And we have a son who is also a Worcester firefighter, and we could not be prouder of him. He's also a United States Marine.
So was your husband a firefighter when you met him, or was he still in high school?
No, he actually was not a firefighter when we met. He worked in a factory. He took the exam and I finally did get on in 1988. And he just fell in love with the job from day one. We fell in love with the job together. Oh, we really had that idyllic, firefighters, hang with firefighters, we party with firefighters, we vacation with firefighters, we, go to weddings and baptism and the fire family becomes your family. Paul had just the greatest group. Uh, he had an extraordinary career. He finally got on the rescue when he was about 4 years into the job. He absolutely loved it. And, the antics that were just taking place daily were legendary, but they are in every firehouse. They used to have a potato gun. Used to enjoy shooting out the windows of some vacant buildings from the parking lot of I'll probably get in trouble for saying.
Yeah, you're giving away secrets now.
Yeah, they had so much fun. They had so much fun. We would go down, we'd take the kids down and watch the, parade from the fire station. And it's just awesome. Everything about it was just best, absolute best. Yeah. And then of course, Paul was in injured on duty about 3 weeks before the December 3rd, 1999 warehouse fire. He was at a fire where a ceiling came down on him. And he was not working the night of the warehouse fire because he's on the rescue. They called in someone else to fill in for him. And that person that filled in for him was not a rescue person. As it turns out, there was a swap of that evening in the firehouse. And one of the parties that ended up replacing Paul on the rescue that night was Diane C. And the listeners probably knew that the warehouse fire lost 6 firefighters in 19. Yeah, there was quite an outpouring of love, emotion for the city of Worcester. But I don't know. Once I heard 60,000 came to the city. We had the president, the vice president, the congressman. My husband was amazed. One of the theaters that were very close with the Jackson Theater. And out of was the warehouse fire, the Larry Firefighter Foundation was born.
Yeah, and I was going to say there are a couple of things to take away from that part. The fact that he wasn't there for the fire, how did he deal with that?
Oh, terribly. Absolutely terribly. I can remember getting a call as I was driving somewhere in Future Road, somewhere in Holden, Massachusetts. And he said, Diane, we've lost 6. And I said, oh God, Paul. And my heart was racing. He was choking back tears. And he went to the firehouse and manned the phones, which was not what he wanted to do, but they wouldn't let him on the job. And, the wives were calling. He was put in a terrible position, obviously, to know what he couldn't say. We all started coming to the scene. And we all remained at the scene for days and days. And Paul got immersed in becoming a liaison. And that went on for months and months and nearly broke our marriage. He didn't know how to stop being a liaison. And I finally gave him an ultimatum one day. He wanted to deliver mail to one of the family that he was caring for. And I had said to him, if you go out that door, the kids and I won't be here when you come back. Yeah. Pick up the phone. He called Frank Rotha, our union president, and he said, Frank, I'm out. And that was it.
And when he says he was out, he means that kind of the liaison part and the being so deep into it.
That ended that moment.
Right.
That moment. Because obviously you have to know, it's a very stressful job and you can get very caught up in it too, because being a liaison, you're invited to a lot of events and and it was very emotional for him. I'm sure, he probably suffered with survivor's guilt and had to do what he could do to somehow repay. Not that you can ever repay, but he put himself in a position where he was gone from his family for over a year, well over a year. And I remember they had a critical incident stress management team set up for the liaisons and the wives of the liaisons. And I finally wrote down and called, and they said, we've been waiting for you, Diane. We've heard from everybody but you.
So they knew that they were going to have to step in at some point.
Yes. Yes, because, when tragedy happens and on the scale that it did, there are a lot of, there's a lot of help. You have so many organizations that come in and there are pretty much nonstop events. And while as a liaison wife, you understand that these happen, they do subside after time. And what wasn't subsiding was the errands that my husband and some others were still participating in. And, it just became too much for me as his wife to deal with any longer. And at that point in time, our marriage had been stretched very thin by these fibers that come with being a liaison. It, I, I don't want you to misunderstand because I was so very proud. The initial months, but months turned into many more months. And, uh, yeah, it it definitely pulled at the fibers of our marriage to the degree that I had to stop it.
So he responds to that and continues. He recovers and continues back onto the job,
Yes, he does.
and your marriage survives and thrives.
It did. Yeah, the marriage has always been, the parts of our marriage have always been wonderful. We've always had a loving home because I grew up in traumatic homes, so I've never wanted that for my children. And my husband is a wonderful husband. When I did go back to work full time, when my children were, I don't know, maybe 10 and 11, I think I went back to work full time. I'd come home and there'd be a fire in the fireplace, and my husband would be cooking dinner on the nights that he was home. And we just had a beautiful nightly ritual of, watching TV together. And he would just, our children seeing us sitting very close together on the sofa, because I never saw that. And I wanted my children to experience a, a loving home. And we did have that, not to say that we didn't fight, because boy, we did. I'm Irish and Italian. So yeah, there's, there's been a few, there's been a few, I don't hold back, I guess it has to say. And I think anybody that knows me would say, oh yeah, that's Diane.
Yeah, that's also the region. That's New England. Let's put it that way. I have some family up there. I know the deal.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, the marriage was always strong, even at its worst, because, we've had a 40-year run. So, we've had issues.
Of course.
Yeah. And, yeah, he holds the line or I hold the line or we hold the line together. We fight, we make up and we move on, you know.
So let's get into why I wanted you to come onto the show. Even though, that's the lead up is fascinating. We could get into that lead up and go so many directions, but there's a very specific reason that you're on the show, and it started way back in 2014, correct?
Yeah.
And so in September of 2014, he was promoted, correct, to lieutenant.
He was. We had gone to, Moosehead Lake with his best friends and my best friends, the Carrolls and the Kuchers, and the Renanes. We rented a beautiful lake house up on Moosehead Lake. And oh my God, we were just having a ridiculous time, having way too much fun. And we were going back because Jay was being promoted and Paul was being promoted. So Paul never wanted to leave the rescue. And he was about 53 years old when he decided that he was going to stop making his way up the ladder. So he took the exam and got the results. And, he was disappointed. He said, "Oh shit, I passed."
You don't know how many times I've heard that before.
Yeah, just live for the rescue. And sure enough, we come back from vacation. We are in City Hall at this amazing ceremony right in Worcester City Hall. And Paul's giving us white cap and get the beautiful pictures taken with the family. And our son was leaving shortly thereafter to go in the Marines to become a firefighter. So in Massachusetts, they have the veterans presence, and that's what my son wanted to do. And we came home, and life was great. He was getting ready to get on to a rig, I guess, at a different firehouse, and he got a call that his PSA level was up, and it had never been up, and it was only up by a hair. I mean, we're talking a hair. And he went in and had a biopsy, and I'll never forget that morning that we went to the doctors, because I was impatient. Like, never in a million years figured that he'd have cancer. He was just, a bodybuilder, and everything he did was centered around health. And, he's the guy in the firehouse that gets on the loudspeaker. He says, "All right, everybody in the weight room now, we're going to lift like men." And it's just who he was. And I don't want anyone to take that the wrong way, because when he's speaking to the girl firefighters too. I always have to say that Paul and I share the same best friend, and she's a firefighter. So yeah, but at any event, so we went to the doctor.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I did not mean to interrupt you. I'm sometimes we don't do a good job of knowing when the natural breaks are there. Yeah. So what's the next step after that call?
Well, then the call was the biopsy, and of course we didn't think anything was going to be wrong. And we go to the doctor's office, and I'm thinking, I got to get out of here because I have groceries I have to do. It's a Saturday or something like that. It was a day that I had off, and I needed to run some errands. And sure enough, the doctor comes in, and he's just talking very nonchalant. And I'm thinking, oh, this is good. This means he's not concerned. It's not cancer. Good. And all of a sudden he says, "Yeah, it's cancer." And I literally screamed and fell into the chair in the little office. And Juan, the sweat just broke out of him, and he had to tear off his shirt, and he sunk into a chair. Oh, God. And then the doctor spoke for about 45 minutes. Neither one of us heard a word he said. We came home, and it was just disbelief. We had always been that family that had the big firefighter house parties, for Christmas. We'd have 200 firefighters in and out of our house that night. It'd be ridiculous parties in our house, and the neighbors put up with it because we were all firefighters in my family. But we didn't have it that year, and people couldn't figure out why. Well, and we couldn't tell anyone. Cal didn't know how to tell my children that he had cancer. He didn't know how to tell his brothers that he had cancer. And I said, "Paul, you have to tell your brothers. They have to know. They have to get checked too." And I'll never forget the phone call he made, because he said to his brothers, "I have a touch of cancer." Who has a touch of cancer?
A touch of cancer. A little bit pregnant.
Oh, exactly. And we did end up telling our kids, so afraid. So afraid. Our son went off to boot camp, and he was so emotional, because he didn't want to leave his dad. And his son was, 23 years old when he Marines. And he had to do it then. So in any event, Paul has his surgery, and we go to St. Elizabeth's in Boston, at Brighton, I think it is. And Paul's driving on, I guess it's Route 9 in Massachusetts. It's, I forget what they call it, the Mass Turnpike. And it's the worst snowstorm in a year. And the windshield wipers are uh, won't even work. So Paul's hanging out the Jeep driving, trying to wipe the windshield off of the snow, sleet, and ice. And I'm thinking, oh, we're going to get killed while we're on the way to save his life. And sure enough, he's hanging out the Jeep window trying to operate the windshield wipers. It was horrible because there's nowhere that you can really pull over on the Mass Turnpike in Boston without getting killed.
No, I can verify that.
So we go to St. Elizabeth, and I mean, it's just amazing. It's, I get a very good feeling when I walk through the doors because there's beautiful statue of Christ, and that's very important to me. I feel a wave come over me that everything's going to be okay. And, his doctor is Dr. Ingbal Turk, who is an absolute ringer for Arnold Schwarzenegger. Speaks with the thick German accent, and he performed the surgery, and the surgery was successful. So the prostate was removed, but it left Paul with what we didn't want to talk about this for a long time because it's humiliating, but it left him incontinent. So you look at him, he looks back into taking care of his body. He's 63, but he looks much younger than that. He's a big built guy. But it left him incontinent. So you can't be a firefighter with incontinence. And so the realization set in. He would not be returning to the job. And I think that was that realization and watching Paul not get out of a reclining chair day after day. It's so difficult. And that's what led to me turning to research, to wanting to understand how does someone so healthy get cancer? Because it comes from a big Irish family. No one in his family has prostate cancer. None of them, none of his cousins and brothers. So I just kept getting this message that there's more to it. There's more to it. And I kept researching firefighter cancer, and Boston had just come up with this great video about firefighter cancer. And I started to, look at all of these sites that were about firefighter cancer. I started looking at sites that led me to research not firefighter cancer, but the gear. And I came across something that showed that there was a firefighter in New Jersey back in, I want to say 2006, whose gear failed. And by failed, I mean he was in a fire and his gear had degraded so much that it caused steam burns throughout his body. And he succumbed to those injuries. The thought of that was so horrifying to me. So I went down to my basement and I pulled his gear out of the cellar, the box that it had been stored away in. And I shined a flashlight through the gear. I pulled the lighter out from that outer shelf, and I could see these, coin-sized pieces of fabric missing. And I describe it as like, look at an oven mitt when you know it's filled with that material that's going to keep you from burning your hands and fingers when you use it. That material was missing in, quarter and dime nickel-sized pieces. And I thought, holy shit, what is going on here? And I ran back upstairs and started to search the materials. Kevlar, Nomex, outer shell, inner shell, moisture barrier. I guess I became like a machine searching and thinking, how does it get through? And then I started reading NFPA documents and learning how to navigate the NFPA machine and looking through all of the material online. And I started thinking, why is the material breaking down? And then I found this 1999 safety alert. I hope I don't get his name wrong, but I want to say was it Al Whitehead, who was the leader of the IAFF in 1999, had sent out a safety alert, this moisture barrier. And this is when things went sideways because it read very strongly that the IAFF was going after the manufacturers because they didn't want to recall this safety barrier that had degraded. I'm thinking, why the hell won't they do what the IAFF is telling them to do? And that's when I started looking into corporations. I'm thinking, what's up with this? What is up with these, corporations that the IAFF is now threatening to sue if they don't, recall that that moisture barrier that's degrading? So at any event, I started to reach out to firefighters and, fire companies and started researching Kevlar and Nomex in firefighter cancer. I was emailing and messaging hundreds of people. I start messaging, and one of the people that I emailed was Erin Brockovich. And out of the clear blue, one day she called and she said, Diane, I've gotten your emails and, I wanted you to know I've gotten a call from a New Hampshire fire chief who said that he has 13 firefighters with cancer. And I said, yeah, that doesn't surprise me because, every firehouse is a cancer cluster. And we started talking about my findings. And she said, do you know if this PFOA or PFOS, the gear? And I said, oh, I've never heard of that. So after the conversation, I hang up the phone and I call, I Google PFOA or PFOS, a firefighter turnout gear. And I find that in 2014, the European Chemical Agency was already petitioning the stakeholders, that being, the DuPont and 3M and Line Gear, et cetera, petitioning them to remove the PFOA from firefighter turnout gear. But what I found actually was a PDF that said that Europe is beginning its transition to non-PFOA PPE. And that's when I really went balls to the walls with social media, because at that time I had maybe a following of like 99 people And I had 99 friends on Facebook at that
Excellent.
time. And I kept it that way because I thought I don't, I had to look small as it, you know, I overcame a lot of childhood trauma. And one of the ways I protected myself was by being isolated. I worked very well in isolation. So if I got 100 friends, that meant somebody had to go. So I always thinking that. And in any event, I began messaging. Anybody know about this? Was PFOA and PPE and in Gazaki, I have that here, and I just couldn't get an answer. I finally started becoming, dropping that shield around myself and became more and more prolific on social media and started to email and research and email the companies, and the responses would say that, it may be there as a byproduct of manufacturing. In amounts. And I said, well, what's a trace amount? Because I don't understand that language. I barely graduated high school. And I finally was able to determine that if I really wanted to know the truth, I'd have to do it myself.
Hey guys, quick break right here just to check in and thank each of you for listening to the show. Your support has been paramount, and I appreciate all of you. I have one request, though. I need you to share the show with everyone you know. Help me get the word out and spread these stories as far and as wide as we can. While you're at it, please leave a review of the show wherever you happen to listen. Feel free to reach out to me at any time to share your story, to talk, or to pass on suggestions. Let's get on with the rest of the show.
So I wrote the article and I sent it to John Miller, the editor of Station Pride. And I think he really just kind of put up with me for weeks and months, and then said, I'm going to look into this, Diane. If what you're saying is true, then, I've got an obligation. So, yeah, he took my article and he said, I can't publish it. It's too long. And, you're making these crazy accusations. You've got no proof of anything. And then he said, but I can't not publish it. So he published it and he called it Real Cancer in Your Gear. A great article. And in it, we saw it published and shared thousands of times. No one was commenting, but they were sharing it. And it really caused a backlash. And we then started seeing who the players were. And, I was so naive, I'll tell you, because I just kept wanting to find out that I was wrong, but never find out that I was wrong then. And I ended up purchasing a set of new never worn turnout gear. And by this time I had really made connections and started to develop a network of firefighters and scientists, and people were reaching out to me on social media. And I had a page called Turnout Gear and PFO Bay that had 5,000 followers. It's no longer in existence. But at any event, we started publishing all of our findings there, and I was able to find Dr. Graham Peasley, the nuclear physicist at Notre Dame, who was just turned into a rock star, serves the fire service because he breaks down the science in a relatable form for us. And with no money, we reached out to the Last Call Foundation honoring firefighter Michael Kennedy. And I reached out to Kathy Crosby Bell. Paul and I drove to Florian Hall, sat with Kathy. And, her son Michael is a firefighter and is also a Marine. And organization was founded after Michael comment to the tragic incident in Boston Back Bay with his Lieutenant Ed Walsh, March 26th, I believe, of 2014. The Back Bay fire. And Kathy, out of that tragedy, formed Moscow Foundation. She's very well known and respected throughout Massachusetts and the nation because of the work that she's done for firefighters. So she funded a study at Graham Peasley because Dr. Peasley always has worked pro bono, but these very technical tests are done by commercial labs and that cost thousands and thousands of dollars. So we needed a network of firefighters. We needed new gear, needed decommissioned gear. And I may never be able to tell you how we got the new gear. I'll leave that up to one of my teammates someday to share that story. But we did. We formed an underground operation, most unlikely group ever. And we pulled off the study that the fire service institutions never did. And it was helpful.
And I was going to say, what were the findings? Because I don't know what the acceptable level is. I don't even like that term, acceptable level of the chemicals, because there's so much we don't know about the chemicals even to today.
Mm-hmm.
What was the finding on that set of gear that Graham Peasley?
That was the pilot study, and that initial study. You can see all of these. I do have a website. It's called Your Turnout Gear and PFOA.com. And there's a great page there. There's a chronology. And in that, you'll find all of these studies in the Station Pride articles. But this pilot study, Dr. Peasley wrote me back and he read off the findings as PFOA and PFNA and all these things. I have no idea what he was talking about. But I could see in this email that he was very concerned. And he said, you're going to need to do a larger study. And that's when we had to pull off the underground operation and get the decommissioned gear and the new gear to Notre Dame and get the funding for the larger peer-reviewed study, which is what we did. So the findings were staggering of the pilot study, but he needed a peer-reviewed study. He had never seen chemicals. He had never seen textiles with the amount of fluorinated material that your turnout gear has. So the pilot study was the awakening of the fire service. We now have a peer-reviewed study, and that was being combated by non-peer-reviewed studies. So once you get into these type of studies, you'll find that there are stringent peer-reviewed studies that are done by respected scientists and researchers. And then you get into what is called consulting studies. And those studies are paid for by an organization that would like you to find in their favor. And that is exactly what happened. The Lion Gear study was a paid consultant study by the group exponent. And what happened was their study refuted Dr. Peasley's study by saying that there were not significant findings in turnout gear. And it also said that if, these short chain PFAS were there, but they were too big to pass through your skin. And I saw that being promulgated throughout the fire service. In those days, I'm no longer firing flaming arrows, but I took it very personally of what was being told to firefighters. And I was a wildcat on social media, aiming an arrow at anybody and everybody that differed with Dr. Peasley's study.
And what does that do, I guess, to you would be the question. What was the backlash?
Oh, God, there was backlash. In fact, because my aim was at Harold Shapeberger, who was the president of the union at that time, I received a call that the union would no longer be affiliated with me um, in Massachusetts. It was obvious when Paul and I would show up at the State House for a hearing, and firefighters that once, welcomed us with open arms wouldn't look at us. And uh, one particular day was extremely bad. We went to give testimony, and the people that I had worked closely with on the strongest um, language for firefighters back in 2018 and 2019, the reception was very cold. I found myself sitting alone in a bench prior to giving my testimony. And it is at that moment that we knew that there had been an order to shun us. So we called it the shunning, and the shunning went on for a number of years. People, Paul and I would enter a room, and people would put their hands in their pockets and bow their head because they were advised not to speak to us or not to be affiliated with us. And what that did to me was it made me fight harder. Um, I fought voraciously and loudly and like a wildcat, like a banshee, uh, and that was drawing a lot of attention. And I think it's safe to say one of the parties that caught the attention was President Kelly, who's now your president, and uh, he became very interested in this issue. And I think it became one of his uh, major pieces for his campaign was that he was going to take on the industries and have had transparency of what has gone on in the IAFF previous to his reign. So as he began his own investigation into the chemicals in your gear, we had now a team from coast to coast that were working on a new structure within the union. And that included firefighters from Massachusetts to Florida, to California, to Washington State, throughout the nation, Alaska. The network was becoming larger and larger, but the work that was being done by the firefighters had to follow the chain of command, and I had no chain of command.
That's the beauty of it, right?
It is, because I was free to call out industry and the NFPA, which I did, and there were powers that be in the institutions. They carry a lot of weight, and the NFPA became my main target because what I saw in there was just so corrupt and so opportunistic. And I'm going to tell you that one day I got a call from my dear friend who's gone now, Bobby Halton. And he said, "Kid, you be careful. You'll be careful, kid." Those of you that might not know the name, Bobby Halton is editor-in-chief of Fire Engineering. And I was poking barbs at Bobby Halton wildly on social media, yelling at him, I guess, on social media and saying, "Why aren't you talking about this, Bobby Halton?" And then he replied, "Diane Cotter, I am not hard to find." And he wrote his phone number. I picked up the phone that instant and called him. We spoke for 2 hours. And, he promised me he'd speak to Graham Peasley. And he did. And he learned all he needed to know. And then Bobby gave us such a platform on fire engineering with PJ Norwood and Frank Reissue. And they'd have our teammates on, the Hump Day Hangout constantly. And, Bobby invited Graham Peasley at FDIC. And I'll never forget that because Bobby had an impossible position. He had to introduce this situation to the fire service, and the members that I was accusing of being corrupt and disingenuous were his paying, his bread and butter. But he did do it in a way that allowed space for us, and that opened up many conversations. And you saw our allies that were working, the Nantucket Fire Department, Fall River Fire Department. And then, of course, you'd see Graham Peasley and Robert Ballard, who took this issue on with us. You'd see all of our allies speaking on the podcast. The articles would then come out and then shared on social media. And that's where I did my best work, was social media. So there are many people that are smiling right now because they were one of the hundreds of people I bombarded daily with these statements and dialogues and articles. And it was just one of the ways you manage a campaign. But one thing that Bobby did say to me, he said, "Kid, listen, there's a meeting in Washington, D.C., and I was asked to attend it. And it's Lion Gear's John Granby was at the IAFF headquarters under Shapeberger to discuss how to mess with Diane Cotter."
So instead of making any changes, they wanted to discredit you and sweep it under the rug.
Right. Well, I had seen that, and that was one of the hardships about being the outsider, is that I could call out Shapeberger, and I wrote blog after blog about Shapeberger and what he was doing. And, then I began seeing the other blogs about Shapeberger and other incidences, the blogs that Eric Lamar wrote, and then the article that came out about the pension, the double dipping of the pension for 20 years. But it was easy for me to do my own thing because I had no one telling me what I could and couldn't do. But as firefighters, you cannot do that. So I was on a lot of podcasts and writing a lot of articles on Medium, and my truths were, in my opinion, I was holding the line for the truth of this issue, but it was wearing away at me because of the backlash of the attacks and of having to spin wheels. I was in full throttle for 5 years. I never geared down from full throttle because it was a 24/7 job. Keep the truth alive. And I was combating organizations that had endless money, and I had no money. And the only way that I could keep the truth was by building network of firefighters that shared their stories, and by ridiculous amounts of emails, so many emails. I think last count was 25,000 emails. I've stopped counting. But we grew a network with senators and congressionals, and uh, you saw Ed Kelly from day one when he took the reins. This is job one for Ed Kelly. He came out swinging. I mean, I was so impressed. I just couldn't believe, that we now had the exact opposite of Harold Shapeberger. But it did take its toll. After a particularly horrific incident, I wore down. I got so beat down that I considered taking my life. And I told my dear friend and ally, Jeff Kanabi, he's a PPE specialist to Alameda County, California. I didn't tell my husband, but I told Jeff that he would be the administrator, that I had made him administrator of the social media pages. He, in the event I took,
So how do you start to recover from that?
I didn't. I didn't recover. That went on. He knew, so he was continuing to check on me. But it was a heavy burden to put on him, too. It wasn't fair. But nonetheless, the recovery came when this, when the new administration got in and the science team was set up. And I could see things shifting and changing. And it felt great. It felt great to see such a big change. We had Ed Kelly and his team, and he's become an activist and an environmentalist, and he's just taken on the industry and taken on the NFPA, because now he's got a group of lawyers, the PFAS law firms, 3 legal teams, and they're going to combat this issue on Capitol Hill. They're like a lobbying group, for the issue, many issues, I guess. They're taking on the NFPA. I think it was just a month ago that papers were served to the NFPA. The IAFF is suing the NFPA on this issue because the NFPA is really, although they're going to tell you that they are a neutral organization, that is a crock of shit. That is such a crock of shit. You can't tell me that these, you've got a corporation like Lion Gear, who's head of corporate responsibility, Vice President John Granby, wants to mess with a firefighter's wife. He sits on, or sat, I don't even know what he does now, but these are the voting members of the NFPA, the people that my husband and others are suing for their cancers. So much has come out of this action. There's so many leaves of it, or arms of this subject. I really don't know where one begins and one ends. But I can tell you that right now I'm a different woman. The pain taught me a lot about myself. It's okay to be out there. I'm not out there to please everybody. I've had a lot of disappointments along the way. You know, I've seen, um, I've seen a lot of people put themselves in this issue that weren't righteous, that were opportunistic. I've had many disappointments, but I've always held the line for, in my opinion, what the truth is. So I've become very tough, and I didn't like being tough. I liked being silly. I liked knitting, but that girl is dead now. You know, I'm a tricky person. I am knitting again though, but I'm not gentle the way I used to be. So yeah, it takes, but I am relieved. I am relieved. You know, in Las Vegas, um, January 30th, the documentary Burned was shown, and Paul and I were flown out by the IAFF, and we were honored in the most fantastic way. I just couldn't be prouder of the IAFF and what they're doing right now.
You said that you're a changed person,
Mm.
and I can understand that because you take up a mantle, and you get beaten down for so long. You have to change in some manner, and it's good to hear that you're back to knitting, and how do you I guess how do you find yourself again?
Well, one of the things that Paul and I have always enjoyed is a natural world. So um, when we downsized after Paul cancer, we bought a house in Ringe, New Hampshire that's on power lines. And we love walking the power lines. We love deer in the backyard. We love the birds in the backyard, the geese in the pond. And we're very blessed that way. To find myself again in writing, I'm writing a memoir about all of this. And I love writing. So that's good. And it's hard because, sometimes I revisit um, my diaries from these days, and it really fucks me up good for a while. Yeah. But it is good to write it out. And the memoir is now taking shape because I'm writing from that view of a seasoned activist. And I look back at, how naive I was. Naive I was. Yeah.
In what sense?
I trusted everyone. I trusted everyone and everything. And, you know, for the first 2 years, I kept thinking that everybody saw this issue like I did, and finally I realized that, that, the NFPA was just such a cog of a machine. I couldn't break through. Um, and I realized that Harold Schaeberger had an agenda that did not align with the facts. And, I had to combat that um, daily, hourly. It became like a hawk. you know, what's this one saying? What's that one saying? And then I'd have to combat that online. And then the backlash would come up on, from firefighters that believed in their leader, but were really giving misinformation. So I
Yeah,
had to
it's that blind allegiance.
It is. Yeah, it was. Yeah. I get messages daily. Diane, you, you, you made us open our eyes, and we didn't want to see it. And, I understand that. I didn't want to see it, for Christ's sakes. For 2 years, I believed it too. I'm like, okay, we'll just wait. And at one point in time, I just said, oh, fuck this. And I just started kicking the arrows and just lighting them up and flaming them through the air and, making them stick. And that's what you had to become. I had to become bombastic and ugly and I had to become that C word that I say regularly. And
Well, you had to become a fighter. That's for goddamn sure.
I had to become a fighter. And I didn't like that.
No, you had to put yourself in a very public eye.
I did. Yeah, I didn't like my kids seeing that, I was yelling at everybody in the fire service. And, I sounded unhinged. And I was unhinged. I was unhinged. I was unhinged.
So I'm gonna remind everybody to go watch the movie or listen to my episode with Elijah, the filmmaker of Burned, because Diane and I talked about it at the beginning before we came on air that we're not really going to get into the science here because I didn't want to get lost in the science. But where are you now? What like what's today like for you?
Today's good. Today is good. I'm writing. I have my computer looks out over the backyard and I call up those emails from 2016, 2017, 2018, and I revisit those days and I'm writing the memoir, uh, looking back at all the people that have come through our story. And it's good. It feels really good. I'll go. It's funny you asked, what's today look like for you? I was going to tell you, I go up and I pick up the trash this string because it's Earth Day, and picked up 8 bags of trash yesterday. So my life is wonderful. I see my grandchildren, our grandchildren so often. They're just two little bear cubs, and yeah, life is good. Um,
And how was Paul today?
I want to say to you that he's fine, but you'll hear in my voice that he's not fine because he's never ever adjusted to not being on the job. I love isolation. I thrive in isolation. He does not. He does not. You know, when you have prostate cancer, one of the things that has to happen when they remove that is prostate, depending on how the surgery goes, is the rechecks for those cancer in your blood still. So he went recently for another recheck, and we wait for the results for that. And you hold your breath. But, like I said on the stage in Las Vegas, I feel guilty saying that because, there are so many widows that are raising families without their husbands. I have my husband. He's a grandfather. He's watching his son's career. And so many of my friends, I call them my friends because we do become friends. They've lost their husband. They've lost their brothers. When we went to the EPA protest, Susan Wind, another activist who, like me, was really, really knocked out by her community and others, she put together a protest, the EPA, and Ed Kelly and Jason Burns, my ride or die guy, Jason Burns, and Jeff Canopy. I got to say that because they're both my brothers. They both spoke so well at this EPA protest. And, you know, we've had to organize these events. But at this event, the protest, you saw in front of the turnout gear pictures of a half dozen firefighters, and their widows sent me those pictures, and that brought them. Um, one was a sister, Dana Sargent, sent her Chicago firefighter Grant his picture there, and you saw Ed Kelly and Jason Barnes give their speeches, and these men and women are gone, and you know the amount of PFOA it takes to grow a tumor in a lab animal is an undetectable amount. Undetectable. Just don't know how to make sense of any of this.
So, your best advice to firefighters today, what would that be?
Don't wear the gear until that moment that you have to. I hate to be the one to say you shouldn't be doing the races in the gear. You shouldn't. I'm going to tell you, when you hear those words, it's cancer, it's going to knock the fuck out of you. When you hear those words, oh, it's devastating. And most of you are going to hear those words. You're going to wonder, was it the gear? The stair climbs in the gear? Was I touching the gear and then ate a sandwich? And, I got that shit on my hands, and Peasley's researchers can't even handle my gear without wearing gloves. Until you can get PFAS-free gear, this is a problem, and it's real. It's real, but it's the one thing that you can control. You should be washing down your stations, getting that dust out of there. Reach out to Jeff Kanabe. I'll tell you how to do it. But the good thing is there's so much material out there now. There's so many studies, and don't take my word for it. Just, you'll find it yourself. The scientists, the science community is behind this, strongly behind this.
You mentioned PFAS-free gear. Where do we stand with that? Where is there progress being made on something like that?
There is an outer shell that's available by Safety Component. You'll see that on my website. I am not endorsed by anybody, so there's no kickback that's going on here. And but I know that because they worked with Graham Peasley. And there are others that wouldn't work with Graham Peasley. They didn't want to be associated with that guy. But Safety Component did work with Graham Peasley, so I think that's a very positive step. Problem is your moisture barrier. Moisture barrier is a sheet Teflon, but you're literally wrapped in Teflon from your neck to your ankles while you're sweating. And all of you know about heat and skin absorption. Manufacturers will tell you that the only thing that is not absorbed through your body is PFAS. But those other carcinogens, they are not this stuff, though. Well, we know that's false. Problem is that the NFPA is holding the line on, and they're going to say that they're not holding the line. Yes, they are. They're holding the line that the safety standard to remove that malicious xenon light test that goes back to that 1999 safety alert for the Bright Tech moisture barrier. They're saying that that the TIA that Ed Kelly wrote was voted down by firefighters. I'm going to tell you something. those firefighters that voted it down are sponsored by the companies that my husband and others are suing for their cancers. So, yeah. Right.
So that's still prevalent today, correct? That
Oh,
kind of incestual relationship.
oh, hell yes. Oh, hell yes. In fact, I'm going to tell you something else too, that I had written a statement that had drawn a lot of controversy. You can read it on my Medium page, and that's the NFPA members must hold, and must declare their conflicts of interest. So this went before a committee discussion. I think that was in early March, and I wasn't there on the task group, although I am a member. I wasn't there that day. But what happened was my comment was snickered at. You know, does that nosy housewife again button herself in here? And thankfully, we had a great ally that day, Neil McMillan, who is the director of science for the IAFF. He held the line and said, "How dare you laugh at this woman? I just watched 2,300 firefighters give her a standing ovation." And the premiere burned. But yeah, that still goes on today.
It's kind of I think I'm gonna leave it there with the story,
Mhm.
and I think that's a pretty good ending.
Mhm.
We'll get into those last two questions if you still have time to do them real quick.
I do.
Okay, so I don't know how much you've listened to the show. I like to tell people once in a while, I like to tell the audience once in a while why I do this segment of the everyday carry. I I was trying to come up with a title for this podcast, and somehow I think that's what was one of the most difficult parts of starting the show. And a coworker of mine brought to attention a book that I had read way back when, and he had read recently, and he said, "I think it makes sense," and it's called "The Things They Carried." And it's a book about Vietnam. It's a novel about Vietnam, and it references the items that this platoon would carry into battle. But then it would also talk about the feelings, emotions, and scars, and everything they brought out of battle. And I thought that was very appropriate because obviously, as first responders, firefighters, cops, whatever, we bring something into a battle, so to speak, whether it be an EMS call or a fire. But we're always carrying something out as well. And so, to that end, I like to ask people, each guest, what's something that they have as an everyday carry, something you feel naked if you leave the house without.
I have a beautiful rosary bracelet, and I don't attend church, but I I do love my faith. I love my spiritual side, and I depend on it.
And then I also like to give the audience a book or two. And so I ask for suggestions of a book you might have read recently or something that's impacted you throughout your life and something that brings value to the audience. So I know you mentioned that you're an avid reader. And so I think this question is perfect for you.
So I love anything true life, and I love the language of letting go. That has helped me so much. There's a paragraph in there that was very prominent in my life, and it's crossing the bridge. I, I think that the phrase goes something to the effect of, "I've crossed the bridge, and even though you're on the other side, it doesn't mean that I'm not there for you. It means that I'm here for you when you come over too."
I like that. It can be interpreted a few ways.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I like that one. I will add the book in the show notes, and
Mhm.
I will add your website and as much information as possible. But I think through your website, people can kind of go off on tangents anyway, correct?
Yeah, well,
You've got plenty of information is what I'm saying.
there is a lot of information there. Yeah. issue.
And if you want to go ahead and give that, and listeners, they don't always read the notes. So if you want to throw it out there.
My website is Your Turnout Gear and PSOA.com.
And where can people find you other than your website? Are you on social media? Do you want any new friends on social media?
Yeah, I'm absolutely public now.
Okay. So go ahead and give those out, and then we'll wrap up, and I'll let you get out here and enjoy the rest of your day.
So on Twitter, I'm DI_Cotter, Cotter. And on Facebook, I'm Diane Cotter. And you'll probably see the background picture is the poster burned.
Okay, perfect. And I just tagged you on Instagram as well, so some of my followers might find you there.
Yes, cool. Yeah, I'm on Insta. I forget about that. I really don't know how Instagram works. For me.
I don't either. I'm learning as I go. So, well, I thank you very much. This has been a long time coming, and it did not disappoint. I hope that I hope I can do the story some justice when I release it.
I have no doubt that you will. I have absolutely no doubt you will. Thank you for letting me tell my story.
No, the thanks is all mine to give, because you shared, and it was emotional, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. You be safe.
Thank you. You too. Take care for the rest of the day. I'll talk to you later.
You betcha.
All right. We're out.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Things We All Carry. Head over to the website, thethingsweallcarry.com, for show notes, resources, and to sign up for the newsletter. Until next week, take care of yourselves and remember to check in on each other.